I want to start by telling you what 10 years actually looks like between two people, because I think when you hear best friend, you might picture something casual. Weekly brunches, a group chat, someone you call when something funny happens. That's not what this was. Ryan and I met the first week of university, the way a lot of significant friendships start, thrown together by proximity, before you've had any chance to curate who you let in. Same dormitory floor, rooms 3 doors apart. I remember the first time we talked properly was over a vending machine that had eaten his money and was refusing to give up a bag of chips. I managed to tilt it at the right angle and free them. He said, "You're my hero," in this completely flat, deadpan way that made me laugh. And that was basically that. 10 years is a long time. Long enough to have been through things together that change you. His dad got sick when we were 24. I drove 4 hours to be there without being asked. When my relationship of 3 years ended badly, he was the person sitting on my kitchen floor with me at midnight, talking about nothing in particular, because he understood that was what I needed. You don't manufacture that kind of knowing. It builds, slowly, through years of showing up consistently. By the time this story takes place, Ryan was not just my closest friend. He was the person I would have described as the one person I fully trusted in my life, without reservation. I want you to hold that for a moment, before I tell you what he did. About 2 years before this story really begins, I introduced Ryan to someone I'd been seeing. Her name was Clara. We'd been together for about 6 months at the point I introduced them, and things were going well, not explosively, not the kind of early relationship energy that makes you act irrationally, but genuinely well. The kind of comfortable, real thing that feels like it might actually go somewhere. Ryan and Clara got along fine when we were all together. No awkwardness, no obvious friction. He seemed to like her. She seemed to find him funny. It was easy in the way it is when two people who matter to you happen to work in each other's company. About 8 months into my relationship with Clara, things between us started getting harder. Nothing dramatic, just the slow drift that sometimes happens when two people's lives are pulling in different directions and neither of them is quite sure how to address it. We had some difficult conversations, some stretches of distance I couldn't quite explain. I talked to Ryan about it, the way I talked to Ryan about everything. Told him what I was feeling, what I wasn't sure about, what I was afraid of. I didn't know, while I was having those conversations, that Ryan and Clara had started talking separately, without me knowing. I found out when Clara ended our relationship, about 10 months in. She said she'd developed feelings for someone else. She didn't say who, at the time. I found out who about 3 weeks later, through the most mundane possible route, a photo on Instagram, the kind of thing that appears without warning in your feed when two people you follow separately suddenly appear together, Ryan and Clara, at a restaurant I recognized from a place we used to all go together. I want to tell you honestly what those first few days felt like, because I think it matters for understanding the rest of this story. It wasn't a clean, single emotion. It was layered in a way that was almost physically disorienting. The end of a relationship you'd cared about, the loss of a friendship you'd trusted completely. The specific, particular sting of understanding that the conversations you'd had with your best friend about your relationship difficulties had probably, in some form, been part of how this had unfolded. Whether intentionally or not, you had handed someone the blueprint of your own vulnerability, and they had used it. I spent a few days feeling things I'm not going to describe in too much detail, because they're private, and also because they don't change what happened next. What I want to tell you is, the moment my thinking shifted, about 4 days after seeing that photo, I was sitting alone, and I realized something. I had 2 options in front of me. The first was to do something. Confront Ryan, send the message I'd drafted and deleted about 8 times, make sure he knew exactly what I knew and exactly how I felt about it. The second option was to do absolutely nothing at all. And here's what I understood, sitting there. If I confronted Ryan, I would get a conversation, some version of an explanation, probably some version of an apology, possibly genuine, possibly performed. And then what? We'd either have a screaming argument that resolved nothing, or a painful conversation that still resolved nothing, and in either case he would know exactly where I stood. He would be able to calibrate his behavior around my reaction. If I did nothing, if I just withdrew, quietly, without explanation or drama, then he would have to live inside his own knowledge of what he'd done. With no reaction from me to respond to, no anger to defend against, no forgiveness to receive, just silence, from someone who had known him for 10 years, who knew exactly what that silence meant. I chose silence. I want to be honest about something, because I think it's important. Choosing not to act is not the same thing as not feeling anything. Those were some genuinely hard months. I'm not going to dress it up as some kind of enlightened Zen decision that cost me nothing, because it did cost something. What I did, practically, was simply remove myself. I stopped initiating contact. When Ryan reached out, and he did reach out, twice in the first couple of weeks, messages that were casual in tone, in a way that told me he was testing the temperature of things. I replied briefly, politely, and without warmth. Not rudely, not coldly enough to confirm what I knew. Just flatly. The kind of flat that could be explained as being busy, or distracted, or going through something. The kind that gave him nothing to work with. He sent one more message about a month later that was less casual, more direct. Something like, "Haven't heard from you much. Everything okay?" I said yes, just been busy, hope you're well. After that, he stopped reaching out, and I waited. Not for anything specific. I wasn't waiting for a particular outcome, wasn't plotting a reveal, or planning a confrontation scheduled for some future date. I was simply living my life, and choosing, consciously, every day, not to spend emotional energy on a situation I couldn't control and hadn't caused. What I didn't know, while I was doing this, was that I didn't actually need to do anything else, because things had already started moving on their own. The first thing I heard, about 5 months after the Instagram photo, came through a mutual friend, someone who knew both me and Ryan, who had no particular reason to share information strategically, who mentioned it almost as an aside in the middle of a different conversation. Ryan and Clara had broken up. Not dramatically, from what I heard, just ended, a few months in, for reasons nobody seemed to have complete clarity on. The specific details didn't interest me particularly, honestly. What registered was simply that the thing that had been built on a betrayal of our friendship had not, as it turned out, been built very sturdily. I didn't feel the satisfaction I might have expected. What I felt was something quieter and more complicated, a kind of resigned recognition maybe. The second thing I heard came a few months after that, and this one surprised me more. Ryan had started talking about me to mutual friends, not angrily, not defensively, in a way that, from what I was told, sounded more like he was trying to process something he couldn't quite name. He had apparently said to more than one person that losing my friendship had been harder than the relationship ending, that he thought about it more than he'd expected to, that he wasn't sure what to do with that. I heard this, and I sat with it for a while. Here's what I think happened, and I want to be clear, this is my read of it, rather than something I can say definitively. Ryan had probably, on some level, expected a reaction from me, a confrontation, an angry message, an unfriending, something that gave him a defined event to respond to. When none of that came, he was left holding the full weight of his own actions without anywhere to put them. There was no argument to win, no forgiveness to seek, no narrative to construct about why what he'd done was more complicated than it looked. There was just me, absent, and his own conscience, which apparently turned out to be more active than either of us might have predicted. I want to be careful here, because I'm not telling you this to be unkind about Ryan. What I'm trying to describe is a specific mechanism that I think is genuinely true about human psychology. Guilt is much harder to process when it has no external target. When someone reacts to what you've done, with anger, with hurt, with accusation, that reaction paradoxically gives you something to push against. It externalizes the conflict. It gives you an argument to have, even if it's a losing one. When there's no reaction, the conflict stays entirely internal, and the person who caused the hurt becomes strangely more present in their absence than they would have been in any confrontation. 10 years of real friendship is not a small thing to lose. I think Ryan discovered this more slowly than he might have expected, and in a much lonelier way. About 14 months after the Instagram photo, Ryan sent me a message that was different from the previous ones. It was long, several paragraphs. He didn't lead with an apology, which actually made it feel more genuine rather than less. It read more like someone thinking out loud on the page than someone performing contrition. He talked about what he knew he'd done, specifically. He talked about the conversations I'd had with him about Clara during those difficult months, and he acknowledged, directly, that he had known that what he was doing was a betrayal while he was doing it. He wasn't offering an explanation for why. He said he didn't think he had one that would hold up. He said he missed me, not the friendship in the abstract, me, specifically. Things I said, things we did, the particular way the 10 years of it had made him feel like he had one person he could actually be himself with. He asked if there was any version of a conversation I was willing to have. I read it 3 times before I replied. My reply was short, not warm, but not closed either. I said I'd appreciated that he'd written what he actually meant. I said I didn't know yet whether there was a path to a real conversation, but that I wasn't ruling it out. I did not tell him that the waiting had been a strategy. I did not tell him that I had watched the relationship with Clara end from a distance and felt the quiet, complicated thing I'd felt. I didn't need to say any of that. He already knew what he'd lost. The 14 months had made that clear in ways I never could have by sending an angry message the week I saw that photo. I haven't fully rebuilt the friendship with Ryan. I want to be honest about that rather than give you a clean ending. We've had one actual conversation, in person, which was difficult and genuine in equal measure. I don't know where it goes from here. That's still something I'm sitting with. What I do know is this. The choice to do nothing was not the easiest choice. It required, every day for a long time, resisting the urge to do something that would have felt satisfying in the moment and probably made everything messier afterward. What I didn't do, send the angry message, make the dramatic exit, post something cryptic, tell mutual friends what had happened in a way designed to shift their perception of him. What happened instead? The relationship that was built on the betrayal ended on its own. Ryan spent 14 months inside his own guilt without a target to aim it at. The silence said everything the angry message would have said, and more, without costing me anything except patience. I think a lot of people underestimate what restraint can do in situations like this. Not because it's morally superior to confrontation. Sometimes confrontation is exactly the right thing. But because there are specific situations where the most powerful move available to you is simply to withdraw, cleanly, and let the weight of what someone did settle entirely onto the only person it belongs to. I didn't destroy anything. I didn't build anything either. I just waited. And it turned out that was enough. That's karma filed. Real betrayal, real patience, real quiet consequences nobody had to manufacture. If this story reached something in you, you already know what to do. Subscribe, hit the bell. There are more of these waiting. I'll see you Tuesday.